My father kicked me out at 13 during the pandemic for his pregnant wife. Now she destroyed him and he's begging for help. But I reminded him of the lesson he taught me. I'm 19 years old, studying engineering at the University of Texas. And recently, my father contacted me after almost 4 years of not speaking, asking for help because basically his life completely fell apart. And honestly, part of me felt satisfied, you know? I know it sounds cruel, but after what he did to me when I was 13, I don't owe him anything. I guess I should start from the beginning so you understand why I said no and blocked his number again without thinking twice. My parents divorced when I was like 8 years old, and custody was shared 50-50. It wasn't a horrible divorce or anything dramatic. They just stopped loving each other and decided to go separate ways. My mom, Michelle, is a surgeon, and my dad, Andrew, works in finance or something like that. I never really understood what he did, but he made good money. After the divorce, everything was relatively normal. You know, 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad. And although it was weird at first, I got used to it. My mom focused on her career, and I admired her so much for that. She was super dedicated and always supported me in everything. My dad, on the other hand, met Rebecca like 2 years after the divorce, and they got married super fast, like within a year of dating. Rebecca was a nurse. She was like 32 when they got married, and at first she seemed nice. I mean, she wasn't my mom, but she wasn't mean to me either. Things were fine until March 2020, when all the COVID chaos started. I was 13 years old, in 7th grade, and suddenly they closed the schools, and everyone panicked. My mom worked at the hospital and obviously was on the front lines with all the pandemic chaos, working insane shifts, like 16 hours a day sometimes. So it was decided that I would stay with my dad and Rebecca during the lockdown because it was safer. You know what I mean? My mom didn't want to risk infecting me coming from the hospital every day. It made sense, I guess. Although honestly, I would have preferred to stay with her. The first few months weren't that bad. Rebecca was pregnant, like 2 months when the quarantine started, and my dad was super excited because he was going to have another child. I was happy for them too. Seriously. I thought it would be cool to have a little brother or sister. But like 4 months into the pregnancy, when Rebecca started getting bigger and all that, her attitude toward me changed completely. I don't know if it was hormones or what, but she became incredibly hostile toward me. Everything I did bothered her. If I left a plate in the sink, she'd yell at me. If I laughed too loud watching videos on my phone, she'd say I was being disrespectful. If I went down to the kitchen to get something to eat, she'd look at me like I was stealing her food. It was constant and horrible tension. And my dad, well, he basically ignored everything. Every time I tried to talk to him about how Rebecca was treating me, he'd tell me she was pregnant and that I needed to be more understanding, that hormones were making her sensitive. My mental health went to shit. Literally. I started having anxiety attacks almost every day. I couldn't sleep well, and the stress was so intense that my hair started falling out. Can you believe it? I was 13 years old, and my hair was falling out in clumps. My mom was super worried when she saw me on a video call and saw I had bald patches, but she couldn't do much either because she was still working like crazy at the hospital, and COVID was worse than ever. I felt completely trapped. You know? Like I had no way out, because I also couldn't go to my mom's because of the contagion risk, and staying there with Rebecca was literally making me sick. Everything exploded in July 2020. I had gone down for breakfast and took out my cereal box from the cabinet, one that my mom had specifically bought for me because it was the only one I liked. When I came back to the kitchen after going to the bathroom, the box wasn't there. I looked everywhere and found it in the trash. Rebecca had thrown it away. I asked her why she did it, and she told me, with a super fake smile, that it was taking up space and that I ate too much anyway. I was frozen. I mean, really? It was a box of cereal. It wasn't taking up space from anything. I told her that wasn't fair and that my mom had bought it for me, and she turned to me and yelled that this was her house and she decided what stayed and what didn't. My dad was there, sitting at the table, reading something on his laptop, and he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. I went to my room crying and locked myself in. Like an hour later, I heard Rebecca and my dad arguing, and I thought, well, maybe he's finally saying something to her. But no. When they came up to my room, my dad knocked on the door, and when I opened it, Rebecca was behind him with her arms crossed and a look of satisfaction I'll never forget. My dad told me, literally, that Rebecca needed space and peace for the pregnancy, and that I was causing too much stress in the house. I asked him what he meant by that, and he was quiet for a moment, looking at Rebecca, and then he told me I had to leave the house, that I needed to find somewhere else to stay. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him, where was I supposed to go in the middle of a pandemic? That Mom couldn't take me in because of her work at the hospital, and he just said I'd figure it out. That maybe I could stay with a friend or something, Rebecca added, with that fake voice. That it was best for everyone. That I'd understand when I was older. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My dad, the man who was supposed to protect and care for me, was kicking me out of his house to please his pregnant wife. At 13 years old, in the middle of a pandemic, I ran downstairs, grabbed my phone, and posted on Instagram what was happening. I put something like, "My dad is kicking me out of the house because his wife doesn't want me here. I'm 13 years old and have nowhere to go." I posted it without thinking it through. I just needed someone to know what was happening. A friend from school, Jessica, wrote to me immediately saying I could stay at her house that night, that her parents were okay with it. I packed a backpack with some clothes, grabbed my charger and laptop for online classes, and climbed out my bedroom window because I didn't want to see my dad or Rebecca again. I walked like 3 blocks to Jessica's house, crying the whole way. And her parents received me super well, hugged me and told me to stay as long as I needed. Meanwhile, my Instagram post went viral among my family. My Aunt Linda, my dad's sister, called me like 2 hours later asking what the hell was going on. I told her everything, and she got furious, like I'd never heard her so angry. She told me she was going to pick me up immediately, that I would stay with her. And when she got to Jessica's house, she also called my dad and yelled at him on the phone in front of me. She told him he was a disgrace. How dare he kick out his own daughter? That Mom and Dad, my grandparents, were going to hear about this. My dad tried to explain to her that it was temporary, that he just needed to give Rebecca space, but Aunt Linda hung up on him. My grandparents, my dad's parents, found out that same night and went to my dad's house. I don't know exactly what they told him, but my aunt told me later that they basically said he was being a horrible father and that Rebecca was manipulating him. My dad tried to defend himself, saying he was trying to keep peace in his marriage, but my grandparents didn't want to hear excuses. I blocked my dad and Rebecca on everything. Phone, social media, everything. I didn't want to know anything about them. I stayed with my Aunt Linda, who lived like 45 minutes from where my dad lived, in a really quiet neighborhood in Houston. She's an elementary school teacher, never got married or had kids, and basically adopted me as her own daughter. She gave me the guest room, we decorated it together, and she made sure I had everything I needed to continue with online school. My mom was still working a ton at the hospital, but came to visit me on weekends when she could, and little by little, things started to get better. My hair stopped falling out after like 2 months of being with my aunt, and my anxiety decreased quite a bit. It was amazing how having a stable environment without hostility helped me so much. During all that time, my dad tried to contact me several times. He sent me messages through relatives, tried to talk to my mom to intercede, but I didn't want anything to do with him. In my mind, he had chosen Rebecca over me, and that choice was irreversible. Rebecca had her baby in November 2020, a girl, and my dad posted photos on Facebook and all that, but I didn't even look at them. I didn't care. My grandparents were disappointed in him, but they were still my grandparents, so they kept in contact with me and visited me often at my aunt's house. It was weird, because they couldn't believe their son had done something like that, but they didn't justify it either. Years passed. I started high school, made new friends, joined the debate team, and basically built a life without my dad in it. My mom, my Aunt Linda, my grandparents, they were my family. When I turned 16, my dad tried to show up at my birthday party that my mom organized at the house. They didn't let him in. It was awkward, but my mom was super firm and told him he wasn't welcome, that he had lost the right to be in my life when he kicked me out. He left crying, I guess. But honestly, it didn't affect me to see him like that. By that point, I had already processed a lot in therapy. Yeah. My mom put me in therapy after the whole 2020 mess, and I had come to the conclusion that I didn't need his validation or his presence to be happy. Everything was relatively calm, until like February of this year, 2024. I got a call from my grandmother crying. She told me that Rebecca had accused my dad of domestic violence, that she had kicked him out of the house with a restraining order, and that he was living in his car. Apparently, Rebecca told him that he had pushed her during a fight, which my dad completely denies, but the court still gave her a temporary restraining order. My grandmother was devastated because, on top of that, Rebecca wasn't letting my dad see his daughter, the girl who was now like 3 years old. My dad lost his job too because the whole scandal reached his office, and basically his life fell apart in a matter of weeks. My grandparents told him they would help him, but with one condition: that he first fix things with me. That he ask me for forgiveness for real. That he take responsibility for what he did to me, and that he show he had changed. My dad at first resisted. Said that I was an adult now and that I should understand he was just trying to keep his marriage together, but my grandparents were firm. They told him that if he didn't make peace with me, he wouldn't receive a penny from them or have their emotional support. They basically disowned him until he complied with that. So, my dad contacted me. He sent me a long message on Instagram, because he was still blocked on my phone, telling me everything that had happened with Rebecca, how she had falsely accused him, how he had lost everything, and asking me for help. He said to forgive him, that he had made a mistake years ago, but that now he needed me, that we were family and family supports each other in difficult times. He didn't mention at any point a real apology for kicking me out at 13. He only talked about his problems and how I could help him solve them by talking to my grandparents. I read the message like 3 times, and each time I got angrier. Really? After 4 years of silence, the first thing he does is ask me for help without even really apologizing? I responded to him, and it was blunt. I told him it wasn't my responsibility to fix his life, that he chose Rebecca over me when I was a vulnerable child, and that now he would have to live with the consequences of his decisions. I told him I wasn't going to intercede with my grandparents because he didn't deserve my help, and that lessons sometimes come late, but they come. I blocked him again after sending him that. My mom told me I did the right thing, that I didn't owe him anything, and that setting boundaries was healthy. My Aunt Linda hugged me and told me she was proud of me for standing firm. Even my grandparents, although they were sad about my dad's situation, understood my position. They told me they weren't going to help him either, until he really owned what he did and changed as a person, not just because he was desperate. The last time I heard about him was like a month ago. He's still living with a friend. I think because he lost the apartment where he was temporarily. He doesn't have a CREDA, stable job, and the restraining order is still in effect, so he can't see his daughter. Rebecca, from what I heard, is already dating someone else and basically erased my dad from her life like it was nothing. It's ironic, isn't it? The woman he kicked me out for ended up doing to him exactly what he did to me, but worse. I don't feel sorry for him. Maybe I should. I don't know. But I can't. When I was 13 and needed him most, he turned his back on me to please someone who ended up being manipulative and abusive. Now he's experiencing that same betrayal and abandonment, and although it sounds cruel, I feel like it's karma. My grandparents will eventually help him, I guess, because they're his parents and can't see him on the street forever. But I'm not going to be part of that equation. My life is fine without him. I'm in college, I have good grades, an amazing group of friends, and a family that truly loves and supports me. My mom, my aunt, my grandparents. That's enough. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever really understand what he did to me. If he'll ever have that epiphany of, wow, I kicked out my 3-year-old daughter in the middle of a pandemic and destroyed our relationship forever. But honestly, it's not my problem anymore. He has to live with his decisions. Just like I had to learn to live without a father, since I was 13. The difference is that I moved forward and built something good from that shit. He's reaping exactly what he sowed. Last week, my aunt asked me if I would ever consider giving my dad a chance, if he really changed and apologized from the heart. I told her I didn't know, that maybe in a few years I could think about it, but that for now the answer was no, and that's okay. Not all stories have to end with reconciliations and happy endings. Sometimes maintaining boundaries and protecting your peace is the right decision, even if that means leaving behind someone who's supposed to always be there for you.